Well, we are in for a treat and we've got lots to cover today. This is Motivation Monday, and I just want to sort of go through for you what we're going to be touching on today. Waiting in the green room is a very dear friend of mine, an amazing individual who is a brother to me. He is a world changer. Today we have on the show a very unique man who's going to help us change our story. Now, stories have always been told. And if I know this, I know that when we look back at 2020, we're going to have a story to tell about 2020. We're going to say 2020 was the year that Kobe Bryant died and passed away. 2020 was the year where we had the Australian bushfires. 2020 was the year that the world stood still. And 2020 was also the year where our view on race was definitely shaken up. Now, things that happen on the outside can actually determine the story you tell yourself. Stories mean a lot. Stories can define who you are. Stories can define your happiness. Stories can define your sadness. Whatever you do in life, it's all connected to a story. That's why I had to invite onto the show today a storyteller that knows a bit about stories, a wordsmith. Our guest for today goes by the name of Alan Kamara. He's a talented rapper, a poet, and a storyteller, aka the Seeking Scholar.
So yeah, I travel the world telling stories to motivate and inspire young people to know how awesome they are. Look at your, for instance, your personal evolution. Because by looking at your personal evolution, developing your personal evolution, you are able to serve the world much, much better.
Very true. Very true.
You know? So that's me, Alim Kamara, rapper, storyteller.
What are your thoughts on before? And I'm sure you're going to answer this question with your story. But let's look at the problem for a second. What impact do you think all of this pandemic, this race issue, is going to have on all our kids, both white, black, Asian? I mean, as in youths in general.
Can I read something that I've come across that I've been sharing?
Okay, please do.
What if 2020 isn't cancelled? What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? A year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw that it finally forces us to grow. A year that screams so loud, finally awakening us from our ignorant slumber. A year we finally accept the need for change, declare change, work for change, become the change. A year we finally band together instead of pushing each other further apart. Wow. 2020 isn't cancelled, but rather the most important year of them all. And that is, and as you were saying earlier in the intro, we're going to have stories to tell. I listened to a conversation yesterday with a young black boy and his father. And the boy he's probably about 4 or 5 years old. And he was telling his dad, like, Daddy, you should paint yourself white so that you won't get hurt, you won't get killed by the police. And when you hear something like that, it says to you, yes, the world is definitely now in a different place, that our young children are forced, or fathers, mothers are forced to have these conversations with our children, but also that these conversations are needed. So we can't run away from what's in front of us. Rather, we get to now face it head on. So it's going to be challenging. It's going to be rough. It's going to be scary. Yet at the same time, it's needed.
Wow. So one of the things I love about what you do, you've been a storyteller now for decades, I would say, you know, and the beauty behind, I think the very first story I heard was the pencil story.
The pencil story.
Which till today is a very powerful story about just making a mark. And I think now more than ever before, you're going to listen, if you're tuned in today, you're in for a treat. You know, he's not going anywhere. We've shut down everything so that he can bring out the best of his stories. And you do a lot of work in primary schools, as in you go into a lot of primary schools to just really throw it down. How do the kids respond to you when you're in the primary schools? Because I know they're just so like, oh, I can't begin.
Came back from Mexico, Jackson, in November. I say just came back, but December actually, it came back.
Mm.
And I did 17 schools, 57 workshops
Come on.
within the space of, I think it was 4 weeks
Mm.
of just storytelling. Now imagine for some of these young children, they've never come into contact with a black man. So
Come
there
on now.
already begins a powerful story of like, where you from? What is your
Mm.
place like that you grew up in? And all of these, and then some of them wanted to touch my beard, touch my hair, simply out of curiosity. And we got to have this moment where I was just exchanging stories. And I said, you know what's amazing? I'm going to tell you about Africa and how
Mm.
beautiful Africa is and African stories. And what's interesting is I said, when I live in the UK, all I see on TV is desert, cactus, and big Mexican hats and mafias.
Mm.
Coming here, I see so much more. And what that teaches me is the perception we can have
Yeah. Yeah.
about a place, about a people, if we don't expand our own learning. And
Yes.
so
True.
by being able to travel over, I got to change my narrative about Mexico.
Mm.
So which is
Okay.
also,
Now.
it's like the storyteller goes over to tell stories, and then it's like, oh, I'm the one who got a new story or got
Yeah.
stories. And if you see Mexico, it's so beautiful. Like
Wow.
I would go back. It is and actually they say Mexico. It's such a
Mexico.
beautiful place. The people were amazing. And then funnily enough, watch this. Oh, when I was going, saying, "Are you sure you want to go Mexico? It's really, really dangerous there." And everybody's telling me these stories in my head. And being a
Wow.
storyteller, I am now learning that if you allow those stories to affect you, when you then
Mm.
go somewhere, you then have this, as you were saying, distorted, blurred, disjointed idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carry that with you. So I was like, listen, just because something happens in a small place somewhere, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean it happens everywhere.
Everywhere.
So there's a monk, apprentice, and they're going along, and as they're going along, they come to a riverbank and they see a woman, and she's struggling to be able to get across. So the grand monk, he decides, he said, "Do you want some help?" And he carries her on his back. Now, you
Hmm.
ain't supposed to be touching no woman. So the apprentice is looking and he's like, he's carrying the woman, but he doesn't say anything. So the grand monk, he carries the woman over to the other side, and then they go about their business and they get to their temple. And whilst
Hmm.
they're in the temple, the young apprentice is sitting there, and you could see he's disturbed. He can't take it anymore. And so he says to the grand monk, and then the grand monk says, like, what, are you okay? It's like, I don't understand. You're not supposed to touch women. Yeah. He said, like, how could you pick that woman up and carry her to the other side? He said, well, I left her by the riverbank. You're still carrying her
Ooh. In your mind.
in your mind.
Ooh, the negative
Yo,
thoughts, the ideas that we're still carrying from the past into the present.
yes.
Ah,
Just know that it's not a joke. The stories that you tell yourself, the words that you say to yourself, they affect you. They have power, but you decide how much power they have. You
but
decide
but
how
but
much you want to let in. Talk to me.
but isn't it a shame that because words are so freely given and
Mhm.
freely taken and freely used,
Yeah.
there's no, it isn't, our words are not seen as precious anymore. We
Yes,
just
that's
use
very
them willy
true.
nilly. We
Right.
underestimate and we take words for granted,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
realizing that the earth was created by words. You
Hmm.
know, we give things name, and once we call that thing that name, it has to
Hmm.
personify what we call it. So what
Hmm.
we're saying now is the words that we use upon ourselves is heavily affecting us and we don't realize it.
When someone listens to a character-driven story, their brain immediately floods with oxytocin, a love hormone.
So 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 all these films that we watch are shaping how we see ourselves, how we feel
Yes,
about ourselves. When you watch a
yes,
horror movie, when
right.
you watch a crime movie, when you watch a love story, when you watch an inspirational story, what you're telling me is that words have become character. Character influences the mind. Mind creates chemical. Chemical enters the body. Body shapes DNA. DNA shapes being. Being shapes habit. Habit shapes character. Character shapes your destiny. That's what you're trying to tell me right about now.
Yeah. And if you see it enough times, if you see horror enough times, you become desensitized.
Break that down.
So,
Break that
so
down.
in other words, you if you're always watching films of violence, if you're
Hmm.
always on GTA, if you're always playing these sorts of games, if you're
Yeah.
always listening to a particular type of music, all of a sudden, even the value of somebody else's life doesn't mean as much anymore because the brain doesn't decipher the brain can't tell the difference between reality and fiction. It's like it gets to the point where it's just like it just is what it is. So this is why
Wow.
the importance of making sure you're drinking. Oh, drinking clean water. Imagine somebody put muddy water and said, "Drink that." Oh, I don't want to drink that. Why not? Because it's dirty. It's muddy. Okay, cool. Let me pour you some fresh, clean water. Have
Hmm.
that and drink that. And when you take that, it's that. Ah. So usually,
Come on.
even we're used to breathing like. When you started, you said breathe in,
Mm.
breathe out. Like, when was the last time you did that?
Yes, yes. We take the simplest things for granted. If you're just watching, this is Motivation for the
Come
Nation, and
on,
today we're
come
talking
on,
about
come
how
on.
to change your story.
So this is a story. It's a story about a character called Anansi the spider.
Mm.
So one day Anansi's sitting down at nighttime and he's looking at people and they're sitting around a campfire and they're bored and they have nothing to do. So he's thinking, oh, how can I motivate, inspire these people? And he says, oh, stories. That's what it is. I need stories. So he goes up to the sky god and says, look, there are no stories being told about me. Yeah. Like
Mm.
everybody talks about all the other animals because they're great and they're big, but no stories are about being told about me. So the sky god then gives him the challenge of capturing some animals. And one of the
Mm.
animals, for instance, and these are not like, these are big, scary animals. So that's the first thing. They're big, scary animals. But he really wants his story to be told. So he decides to accept the challenge. And one of the characters is Python.
Mm.
And he's like, man,
Wow.
I gotta catch Python. So what he decides to do is he decides to start walking around and he's talking to himself, but he's talking to himself next to Python. So as he's talking to himself, Python hears him and he's like, what are you talking about? He says, oh no, I was just arguing with my friend, and my friend said, you're not longer than this stick. And I'm like, yes, he is. No, you're not. And then Python goes, well, let me just measure up next to the stick. So Python lays down flat, and then Nancy puts the stick, and then he quickly ties up Python, yeah, and takes Python up to the sky god. Right? And this happens with several other animals.
Mm.
And in the end, he's like, like after I've done it, can I have my stories now? He's like, well, just you taking action, you just created your story. Come on.
Hit me.
So there's once a man who followed the Tao.
Mm.
And so he would teach that everything around us was an illusion. Everything around us was an illusion.
Mm.
So it just so happens that his son passed away. And he was crying when his son passed. And someone came to him and they said, don't understand. You've been teaching us that everything is an illusion.
It's an illusion. Yeah.
So then how can you be crying with the passing of your son? He said, because he was a beautiful illusion. Says he was a beautiful illusion. So in other words, don't hide your feelings. There are going to be times when you want to cry, cry. There are going to be times when you are hurting, and it will hurt. It will hurt. And sometimes we have to, as human beings, we have to go. We cannot just lock away our emotions. It's what we then decide to do after we have cried, after we've poured those tears out. What do we then decide? What do we then decide to do? Who are we? Because those are the challenges, and when we face those challenges, we become better. We become stronger. A lot of people who are in social work and who do therapy, why they do it. And you'll find a big number of them went through things. Oh my gosh, Jackson, are you ready?
Come on.
When you've been bullied, when you've been abused, when you've been taken advantage of, it means you now have a level of understanding of what it is to go through that pain. So when somebody else comes to you as part of your personal evolution, when somebody else comes to you, you stand in a place of understanding.
Ooh. Okay, let's wrap up with the acronym SACRED. Talk us through this, because I think we're going to have to come back to the show to break down the meaning of acronym.
The A in SACRED is action. You need to be taking action of what's happening in our personal lives so that we can be stronger for the outside world and serving others. The C is creativity. This is the time right now where you have the time and space to be creative. The R is religious. What I mean by religious is by doing things repetitively, doing things consistently. Whether it's meditating, whether it's exercising, find something. Whether it's getting together with the family once a week at the dinner table, rather than everybody's in their room, busy doing what they're doing. Have a religious sense of commitment. And then the E is emotions. Like I see it like emotions. What can happen is like you've got it bottled in, or it's in a lamp, and when you release it, like a genie, you get wishes. So you got to release those emotions. And then the D is dream. The dream is where we get to take the imagination to where everybody might feel as if they're saying it's impossible. Everybody around you might be turning around and saying it's not possible. You can't do that. So sacred, if we can put up the whole thing, say sacred stories. Your story is powerful. Your story is beautiful. Create and work towards your story.